Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 8, the last week of the course. Congratulations, we've made it. I know it's a bit of a whirlwind with these 8-week courses, but I really appreciate everybody sort of sticking in and staying engaged. So this week we're going to talk about interpersonal relationships and some of the theories that are connected with interpersonal relationships. This will sort of connect in a lot of what we've been talking about already, the different ways that we communicate, and how that contributes to our relationships. So, firstly, when we're talking about relationships, there's sort of two different categories that we can sort them into. There's social relationships and personal relationships. Social relationships exist purely due to some sort of demand that, like, we have to have a relationship with this person, whether it's like an assigned roommate that we have, or a coworker, or a classmate. These aren't relationships exist purely because we have some sort of connection in our daily lives that require we talk with this person. Whereas personal relationships are relationships that involve behavioral interdependence, need fulfillment, and emotional attachment, which we'll go through each of those on the next slide. But these are the people that we more choose to be around or have a deeper personal attachment to, such as friends, romantic partners, or family members. People that we, interact with on a deeper level rather than just sort of the surface level that structural demands in social relationships require. So, to break down the personal relationship definition a little bit more, we have that behavioral interdependence, need fulfillment, and emotional attachment. So, when we're discussing behavioral interdependence, we're looking at the nature that we've talked about in previous weeks, where when I do something, it affects you, and when you do something, it affects me, and the strength of that interaction. So, in order to have behavioral interdependence, our interactions need to be frequent. Your actions don't affect me if I only see you once a year, typically, versus if I see you every day. You have to be present, and we have to interact frequently for our actions to affect each other. Our relationship has to be strong, meaning that when you do something, it has a large influence over my life, and vice versa. The interactions and different ways we can affect our partner also should be diverse. So in social relationships, say like with a coworker, I can only impact them in a set variety of ways with my actions, right? Our relationship is purely based on our working environment, so my actions that impact them are going to be limited to the things in the workplace. Whereas with friends or family members outside the workplace, there's many different ways that my actions might influence them, and we might be relying on each other. Thus, we have a diverse set of influences. And enduring, meaning it has lasted a long time. If it's very surface level and fleeting, it doesn't matter as much. We're not very interdependent. But the longer we stick with somebody, the more interdependent we become. There is also need fulfillment. We have relationships not just because they're fun, but because we also have needs that we want to fill. Whether this is assistance, our relationships help us, help us out at times, whether it's giving us a ride to the airport or lending us money. We are able to help each other going back and forth. We also desire to take care of other people as well as feel like we're being taken care of, thus like nurturing and intimacy. We want to feel as though we have these deeper connections with people, and that's a need that we have fulfilled through these relationships. And then reassurance of our own worth. We often, as we discussed sort of in the weeks about the self, our self-esteem is often based about how we think others react to us. So if we have these close relationships that help us feel better about ourselves, because, we can't be that bad of a person, right? If somebody is willing to be our friend, or if somebody wants to spend time with us. So it reassures us of our own self-worth when we have these deeper connections. And then finally, emotional attachment. We're humans, we're emotional beings. So, of course, having these deeper emotional attachments is an important part of our life and our social structure. So, relationship cultures is something that was briefly sort of touched on in the intercultural communication segment. But relationship cultures are these sort of like privately developed rules and language and systems of understanding that we create between two people in our specific relationships. And what I mean by that is like each of our relationships, we have our own little different cultural things that we have normalized. So, for example, if you have like 3 different friends, you may notice that as you go from one friend to the next, your behavior changes a little bit, whether intentional or not, whether it's the language that you're using or what you're doing when you visit those friends. You'll not behave exactly the same between those different people. Or if this isn't ringing a bell, say you have a friend that when they bring you around to their other friends, they start behaving differently. Or maybe a partner that brings you around their friends and they start hanging out with them and they behave differently in front of their friends than they do with you. It's because you have different relationship cultures with those different groups. And when they sort of clash, it can be jarring at times. This also can be broken down into like rules versus language. So rules are referencing the different sort of like unspoken agreements that we have with these people, whether it's like when I go hang out with a friend, the first thing we always do is go to our favorite restaurant, and that's just one of our rules that we have. Or the first thing we discuss is our partners. Or when you go home, the first thing you discuss with your family is how school is going, or what's up with your other friend that we haven't heard about in a while. These rules sort of outline the expectations of what you have when you speak with these people or when you're meeting with these people in these relationships. Whereas language refers to, obviously, the different ways that we speak and change how we speak when discussing things with different people. So these relationship cultures do have a function. Besides just, developing slowly over time, they do serve a purpose. The first is that it helps us sort of establish a difference between us in our relationship and everybody else. You can tell when somebody's, you go up to people and you can tell they've known each other for a long time just based off of their little small interaction differences that they might have, whether it's inside jokes or language or body language. You can tell when people have known each other for a while and they've set themselves up as sort of a pairing or a group that differentiates them from everybody else in the surrounding area. It also allows us to feel more connected with this person. By like, if I have a specific culture with somebody, that's something special to us that allows us to differentiate ourselves from others. This also helps us regularize our interactions with others, meaning that if I have a culture set up with somebody, I also know what to expect when I go to have an interaction with them. I know what to expect when I have a conversation with my parents versus different sets of friends versus a partner, because we have set up these sort of interactions and culture based off of our mutual interests or whatnot with our pasts. So if I go to one friend who I always go out to the movies with, I can expect the same thing from them, versus if I go to a friend that I go out to parties with, I might expect things based off of our previous relationship culture. That allows me to regularize our interactions and create level expectations. So we'll talk about some other models here in a minute, but I wanted to bring up Knapp's relationship model now, as I think it's a helpful sort of visual moving forward. But Knapp shows that relationships progress through these stages. You sort of walk from left to right when developing a relationship, and you can stop on any stair or stop at the top, but you progress from left to right. And as you're walking up the stairs on the left, you are coming together and your relationship is deepening and a bond is strengthening. Versus as you're walking down the stairs on the right, the relationship is separating and falling apart or coming apart. And throughout this entire lecture, the relationships that we're talking about can reference anything from friendships to romantic relationships to family relationships. This lecture is sort of a consolidation of 3 or 4 lectures in a standard 16-week course. And Knapp's model does refer more to romantic relationships, which is what we'll be doing a lot during this lecture. But just know that a lot of these models that we go over today can be applied to other types of relationships and not just romantic ones. But that being said, if we're walking through this model, we start with initiating on the bottom left side. Initiating in a relationship is just that initial hello. When you're walking up to somebody and you say hi or you're introduced to somebody. If the initiation goes well, you go to experimenting, and this is known as small talk. You are talking about, the weather, your classes, whatever it might be, very surface level things, just trying to feel out to see if you guys have any things in common, if you enjoy speaking with each other. If experimenting goes well, you'll go into the intensifying stage, where maybe you now found some things in common and you might start considering each other friends. Potentially like hanging out independent of the other people who introduced you or your initial circumstance, and trying to actually like get to know each other on a deeper level. If you are interested now in that like deeper relationship, you'll go into this integrating phase where you now are sort of combining lives in a way, where you are hanging out with the same people or sharing your hobbies with each other to the point where you're now so integrated in each other's lives that you are almost considered as a pair or a unit. Again, this is referencing more relationships. So you're now so integrated into each other's lives that you are doing things together constantly. When you invite one to a party, it's appropriate to invite the other one of you because you are considered sort of a pair at this time. And then you have bonding, which is the long-term commitment to stay to each other, whether it's marriage or like moving in together, whatever that might be. The bonding phase is not bonding in the sense of creating a relationship, but bonding in the sense of actually tying yourselves to each other in some meaningful, long-lasting way. And obviously, many relationships end here, but it is also important to talk about the coming apart of a relationship in the phases that occur when a relationship starts to sort of fall apart. So the first step to a relationship coming apart is known as differentiating. And this is that initial mental step where you start to think of yourself more individually again rather than as that pair. Whether it's starting to get very specific about differentiating your friend groups or your hobbies, which some couples this would not be affecting them, but for others this is definitely a huge thing. You start to think about yourself first rather than yourself as a pair. When somebody invites you, they're inviting you, not you and your partner. And you start to break down between this sort of joint versus individual mentality. Next, you would fall into circumscribing, which is starting to limit what is considered like okay conversations and setting boundaries about what you avoid with your partner. So we might start avoiding talking about specific things that have caused disagreements in the past, or maybe we stop talking about our mutual friends and we start setting boundaries. We only now talk about the kids that we have, or we only now talk about the mutual finances rather than a more open dialogue, and you start setting these boundaries and limits about what is considered open to discuss. Next, there is stagnating. At this point, you are largely emotionally separate from the other person, and you're only staying together due to some other reason, such as like you have a joint lease or you have kids that you're staying together to make it easier, but you are no longer emotionally together, and you are in this sort of still stagnant, unchanging environment until something happens that allows for further coming apart. When that thing does happen, you move into the avoiding phase, where you are intentionally avoiding contact. So the kids have moved out, now I can intentionally avoid this other person, or our lease ended, so now I don't have to talk to them. And then terminating is the official end, where you are no longer dependent on each other. You no longer, update each other about what's going on, and you no longer rely on each other. If somebody wants to move to a different state, they don't have to talk to the other person first. They just go. So obviously many relationships make it to this phase, others don't make it at all down the coming apart line. But if you are following the sort of initiation to terminating phases of a relationship, they generally follow this model that Knapp created. So there are many different points in a relationship that influence whether you are in Knapp's model coming together and growing as a relationship versus coming apart and the relationship is falling apart. And when you can point to like specific turning events, these are known as turning points. So these are different points in times, different actions that have consequences for the relationship partners, whether positive or negative, that change the trajectory of the relationship. So, for example, say you are dating somebody new and it's going well, you've gone on a couple dates, you really like this person, and you want to take it to the next step and introduce them to your friends and family members. And when you do so, that interaction just goes horribly. Whether an argument happens or their behavior changes in front of friends, whatever it might be, something goes incredibly wrong. You might decide to slam the brakes on your relationship, slow things way down, or potentially even break up with this person. So this one specific event was sort of a go, no-go on your relationship, and turned the direction of it from coming together to coming apart, or just slowed it down. You also might have something that speeds it up, say that interaction goes really well. That might influence you even more to develop a relationship with this person and take you to the next step of your relationship where you are now getting more integrated into each other's lives. So these are just specific points that might lead to, relationship development or relationship falling apart into perhaps like a breakup or something like that. And you go through tons of these in the course of any relationship. Whether it's introducing to family and friends, or a proposal that maybe didn't go the way that somebody was hoping, or moving in together, whatever it might be. All these different points have the opportunity to, reinforce and develop a relationship in a happy and healthy way, or bring up hurdles that might slow things down or potentially end the relationship. And when we're talking about relationship ending, we're obviously talking about like breakups, which I don't need to tell you can be very complicated. It's really hard sometimes to end a relationship. It's not as easy as just walking away. And this is often because we have these sort of competing tensions in our relationships. So it's not often like clean cut that we just need to leave. Sometimes it's this lingering feeling of we're not completely happy, but we've also invested a lot in this person, whatever it might be. We are feeling as though we are constantly initiating, or we're constantly having to take care of the other person, rather than have a more mutual, balanced relationship. Maybe we're struggling with openness and closedness. We want to be open about our feelings, but if we're getting to a point where we're near a breakup, we're starting to close off. We feel these competing tensions of, we've been with this person for a long time, and it's not always easy to let go of a relationship. Same if you're being broken up with. It's not easy to let go of a relationship that you've invested a lot into. So the next topic we're going to discuss is jealousy, and how jealousy manifests in relationships. But jealousy is this like aversive emotional experience that involves anger, sadness, fear, whatever it might be, which is induced by threat of actual loss, or that is either real or imagined. And that is the real key component of real or imagined rivals. So if I am jealous of something, it might be that threat is something that I should actually be jealous of, or it might be something that I am imagining I should be jealous of, and imagining that there's some rival to my relationship that might threaten it or maybe even break us up. So, jealousy is our coping mechanism that we have to cope with these ideas of potential loss or threat. So, there's three primary manifestations of jealousy. The first is cognitive. These are those thoughts. When you are going through and you're getting suspicious and you're starting to worry, it's that train of thought that you have that leads you to jealousy. There is also emotional, these feelings of insecurity and fear and sadness and anger. It manifests differently for different types of people, but you have, in addition to these thoughts, these deep emotional feelings. And there's also behavioral manifestations, which is like confronting each other or questioning. So for some people, if they manifest in a very cognitive way, they will sit there and think about things very deeply, but they may never actually confront the other person. Whereas other people might immediately confront and question their partner when they have a concern or perceive some sort of threat. And there are a few explanations for jealousy, like why we feel jealousy as an emotion. And these are three potential explanations, though they are by no means the only explanations out there. But we'll go through these three. The first is an evolutionary perspective, that jealousy was evolved because it has significance. And this sort of theory or this explanation separates between male and female jealousy. Male jealousy is largely based off of whether or not they feel like they are being cheated on. So they are very protective over having being the only partner in the relationship. And they'll be particularly sensitive to if they feel like they are being cheated on. Whereas female jealousy is more on an emotional scale, and they feel as mate selection is the way it's phrased, often in the evolutionary perspective, but it's based more on whether they feel as though they emotionally are being neglected in the relationship, or their partner is selecting somebody else as a mate rather than them. So take that as you will, but that's one of the perspectives, which we'll get into a little more in the next slide. There's also the self-evaluation maintenance theory, which occurs that when we compare ourselves to others on dimensions that are important to us. So we are using it as a way to evaluate ourselves. So if my partner brings a new friend around that is incredibly rich, and I start to feel very threatened because I value money a lot, I will compare myself to them and make judgments and potentially feel jealous about that relationship because that's something that I value. Similarly, if they have a deep emotional relationship and that's something that I value, I might start to feel jealous because I don't get that from my partner. Whatever that might be, it's based off of self-evaluation. There's also the relational power perspective, which is that jealousy serves as a way for weaker partners to establish power in the relationship. So if I feel as though I don't have much power in my relationship, I can make my partner jealous to gain power. And it's a way of keeping relationships balanced and making sure that the weaker partner has emotional tools to gain in relationships. Referencing back to the evolutionary perspective, we do see gender differences in how jealousy is handled and approached by men and women. So this has been studied for a while now, and this is sort of the summary of those studies. So when it comes to feelings of jealousy, when you approach a man versus approach a woman about whether or not they are feeling jealousy, they tend to approach it in different ways. If you ask a man if he feels jealous, his first reaction is the tendency to deny that feeling. Whereas if you ask a woman, they generally will acknowledge it in comparison to men. So there's already this sort of difference between denial and acceptance of the jealousy. Then if we're talking about how jealousy is expressed, men tend to show jealousy through anger, whether it's, just being upset with their partner about something, or all the way up to wanting to fight the person that they are jealous of as a sort of competition. It tends to be expressed more through anger, whereas women tend to express it through sadness and depression. So if one of these people feels like they are being cheated on, a man will get aggressive about that, will be more angry about it, whereas a woman will internalize and become very upset about it on a more emotional level. Then we have the focus of the jealousy. Men tend to be more jealous of cheating in a sexual activity sort of manner, whereas women tend to be more jealous of emotional involvement and emotional levels of cheating. To the point where this disconnect can be so aggressive that they won't even see the other one as being cheating. So some men only consider sexual activity as cheating, some women only consider the emotional. But that is the focus of the jealousy, is the emotional involvement or the sexual involvement. Then the reaction is when you feel jealous, the men tend to blame out. They will blame their partners or another person, whereas women will tend to blame themselves for feeling jealous. So if a man feels as though his partner is cheating, he will blame the partner and say that they are behaving poorly. Whereas if a woman feels like that, she will feel like if she feels that somebody's cheating, she will try and figure out what went wrong with herself to influence that cheating. And finally, what becomes of the jealousy? Men will get competitive, again, potentially even starting fights with the other person, whether it's their partner or the object of the jealousy, so potentially some affair partner. And women tend to cling harder to their partners. If they feel jealous, they will lock down and cling on to their partner in an attempt to make that emotional involvement deeper for them and sort of pull them away from the other partner. So obviously these are general patterns that have been seen between genders and not, the rule in any single relationship. But it is interesting and sort of reinforces this evolutionary perspective that jealousy between genders is different and has evolved over time. Alright, so we're going to shift gears into what is traditionally another week content of the course, and I won't go through absolutely everything because that's too much for just 1 week, but we'll be going through some of the relationship theories that are common in interpersonal research. The first of these theories that we'll address is the theory of interpersonal attraction. And this theory tries to address what are the different components or variables that lead to attraction, like in the beginning of a relationship, but all the different ways that we might initiate attraction. And this can be broken into P, E, and O variables. P variables are attributes of the person evaluating the other. So reasons that I might be attracted to somebody, the P variables are dependent on me as the person evaluating. So this might be like my expectations or my social skills or whatever my mindset that I have set up. Obviously, if I am in a place where maybe I don't have the best social skills, I am not going to be setting myself up very well for evaluating other people positively. Or if I have really unreasonable expectations, I will not be evaluating the other person very fairly. Similarly, if I have really low expectations, I might be more willing to be attracted to just about anybody. So these are all based off of my own personal traits, and that will change how I evaluate others. There's also E variables. These are environmental variables. So these are attributes of the physical and social environment in which you find yourself. So one example of this is for just proximity. I'm more likely to be attracted to people that I interact with more frequently. If I never am interacting with somebody, that doesn't give me much of an opportunity to develop attraction towards them. There's also the pleasantness of the environment. One example might be when you're on vacation and you're in a very pleasant environment and you're feeling a lack of stress and more openness, you will be more open to others in those environments than, say, if you are in a much more stressful or closed-off environment that is less pleasant. There is also O variables, which is the attributes of the other person that we are evaluating, whether it's their personality or their physical attractiveness. When it comes to when people asked why you are attracted to another person, these are typically the reasons that people will give. Oh, they were very beautiful or handsome. They had a great personality. All the things that are about them. And these variables can interact, specifically the P and O variables. So my personal attributes and the attributes of the other person really can interact to either reinforce a relationship or make it fall apart. So if, say, my personal attributes and the attributes of this other person are very similar, that can lead to the sort of similar people stick together mentality. If we have a lot of shared hobbies or shared interests, if we are similar socially, we are more likely to hit it off very quickly, which is what a lot of people would talk about, like we had chemistry or there was a spark, that really initial interaction. Similarly, you can also have the complementarity of P and O, or complementary attributes, which is the sort of opposites attract mentality of, say, one person is really outgoing and extroverted, they might complement an introvert nicely, and they might balance each other out, leading to a unique relationship that also works very well. And then there's reciprocal liking, where this is simply put, we like people who like us. If we feel as though somebody is attracted to us, we are more likely to be attracted to them. So in the theory of interpersonal interaction and attraction, there can be interactions between these different levels of variables to sort of amplify them. All right, so moving on to stimulus value role theory. This is one that's maybe relied on a little bit less, but this refers to what we value most at different stages in a relationship when it comes to attraction. So early in a relationship during the stimulus stage, this is before we even start getting to know somebody, our attraction is based off of physical appearance. Whether or not we are attracted to them before even having to speak to them is purely based off of physical appearance. Then, as we get talking, we move into the value stage. In this stage, we begin to rely more on our similarities and our personalities for our level of attraction. So physical appearance sort of takes a back seat, and now we're more focused on whether they like the same things we do, believe the same things we do, value the same things we do. Then, as we move a little bit further into the relationship, we move into what's called the role stage, which is a little bit more nuanced. This is whether we feel as though they are holding up their end of the bargain, their end of the commitment. So instead of we have already established that we believe the same things or value the same things, now are they acting in a way that is holding up their side of the relationship, or are they sort of lacking in their duties and are not performing the way that you would wish? So our attraction in the role stage now is based off of whether we feel like we are both operating in the way that we should be and are equal partners in the relationship. Next, we have social exchange theory. This is one you might have encountered before in some of your other classes. It's very popular. But social exchange theory is known as an economic model in that it's based in a sort of like cost-benefit analysis of the relationship. So we evaluate our relationship based off of whether we are getting more pros than cons on a personal level. And something that's important in this theory is how we perceive those rewards and costs. We have a tendency to sort of overestimate our contributions to a relationship while also underestimating the other person's contributions. So our perceptions of costs and rewards might be a little different than our partners. So for example, if you and your roommate If we go back to an example from a previous week, have chores laid out in a specific way, you are going to think about all the different things that you are doing, right? I recently vacuumed, I did the dishes, I cleaned the windows, I cleaned out the fridge. You're thinking about all of these things you have done, and then you're at the same time thinking, oh, and they didn't even do any of their chores. They didn't unload the dishes. They didn't wipe down the counters. They didn't clean the bathrooms. But meanwhile, they're sort of doing the same things, where they see themselves as having done all these things, and you have lacking on your own contributions. So our perception does make a very large difference in how we value and view the pros and cons of the relationship. We overestimate the negatives and undervalue the positives. So maybe our roommate did do those things, but we think that they didn't, and that's going to hurt the relationship a lot more than if they had done it in the first place. We also have expectations. Our sense of pros and cons is going to also depend on where we set the bar. If we set the bar very high for a relationship, even a single negative in a relationship can really very seriously negatively influence whether or not we want to stay with a person. Essentially, if we set the bar really high, we're not leaving much room for error. So our pro-con analysis might be heavily weighted towards the pro side, and any con is enough to sort of take us away. There's also alternatives. If we are in a relationship and that we aren't happy in, and we know we have other alternatives, our pro-con analysis will lead us to be more likely to leave to that other relationship. But if we feel that we don't have other options, we're going to be more tolerant of the negatives and we'll be more likely to stay. So if I'm in a bad relationship, but I know that I have no other options, I may decide to stay anyway. Sorry if you hear the noise outside my window. There's landscaping happening. And finally, investments. Many might know this as the sunken cost fallacy. The more we invest into a relationship, the more likely we are to stay, whether it's paying for gifts or travel or whatever it is. We often feel as though we are contributing that, and if we leave the relationship, that money is lost and it served no purpose, whether or not that's beneficial or not. So a lot of these are based off of this sort of economic view of positive and negative contributions to the relationship. So we can see that difference in perception from the last slide in this Pew survey, where we think that we are contributing more, meanwhile thinking that our partner is contributing less. This survey asked men and women about the division of labor at home. So it broke it down into chores, finances, and managing children and schedules, and asked them to say who does more of each task. And if we're looking at the chores, women estimated that they did more, whereas men were more likely to say that the men did more chores at home, or that it was more equal. Whereas if you go to finances, women said that, yes, women handle the finances more, whereas men said that men handle the finances more. And then you also, when it comes to managing their schedule, most say that women does more, but men are more likely to say that men do more when it comes to managing the children. So you can see this sort of disconnect between what we feel we're doing and what we feel our partner is doing in our relationship. And we tend to think that we are doing more than perhaps that we are, and we tend to underestimate what they are doing, perhaps compared to what they are doing. Similar to social exchange theory is equity theory. Equity theory takes social exchange theory, that sort of cost-benefit analysis, and takes it one step forward to where now we're also comparing the cost benefits of our partner to our own. So we want our relationship to feel equal, so we assess our own ratio of rewards to costs and theirs. So say that I'm in a relationship and I'm enduring more costs than rewards. Say that we are in a long distance relationship and things are pretty tough right now, but I see that my partner is also getting the same treatment. they also are incurring more costs than rewards, then I'm less likely to be upset about that. Versus if we're in a long distance relationship, but I'm the one doing all the traveling and they're actually like just staying put, I might be more upset about that because I don't feel as though it's equal, and that they are getting more rewards out of the relationship than I am. Uh, and we might evaluate this on sort of variable by variable levels of like how much are we spending, how much time are we giving, what's our emotional output. But we also can do this in a sort of comparison sort of way. So I might say, oh, I'm contributing a lot more financially to the relationship. That cost is much bigger for me, but my partner is contributing more in terms of like household labor, and it evens out. So our costs and benefits do end up evening out because they get the benefit of not having to provide financially, and I get the benefit of not having to do chores at home. So we sort of make sure that our relationships are balanced and equal, in comparison to social exchange theory, which is just focused on whether or not I feel a certain way. Um, we will do this sort of analysis with our partner in terms of equity theory. And our last theory for the day is relationship dialects theory, which essentially goes into the fact that social lives are complex and they contain contradictions. And in our relationships, we have to work on balancing these contradictions to maintain a sort of compatible partnership. So, in a relationship, we desire things that are incompatible. So, for example, we have autonomy and connection. We want to feel connected to our partner and like we can rely on each other, but we also want to feel like we're our own person and we want our own space, which are not always, the most compatible. We also want to have surprises and excitement and novelty, but we also want our partner to be predictable and reliable and consistent. So we want surprises, but we also want consistency. Similarly, we also want to be open and honest, and we want to have open conversation with our partner, but there also might be some things that we just want to keep private. Or if you flip this, you might desire openness from your partner, but also be struggling to open up yourself, which can be a very difficult thing to overcome. So relationship dialects theory just refers to these sort of dyads of incompatible things that we want at the same time. So far, we've been talking about like relationships more broadly, using romantic relationship examples. But these next couple lines are going to be more explicitly about romantic relationships rather than just relationships generally. So when I say romantic relationships, I'm referring to like long-term relationships, people who cohabitate, meaning that they live together and rely on each other, and like people in marriages, these sort of longer term, more deeply entrenched romantic relationships. So given that, there was some research that has been going on for decades now that wanted to identify different types of couples. Not necessarily saying one is entirely better than the other, but they wanted to identify of these couples that are together for a long time, what are the different types in them? Are they all super secure and directly connected, or are there different types of long-term connections? And this research found 3 different types of couples that end up in these really long-term relationships. The first is the traditional couple, which is what you might picture when you think about people who are in it for the long haul. These are people who are blended together and completely interdependent. So the sweet old couple that does everything together and they are growing old together. They are completely interdependent on each other and they work as a unit constantly. If you're inviting one, the other one might as well be there too because they work together. So this is that more traditional view of a blended couple. There are also independent couples, which stresses that individual partners receive independence in the relationship. They still spend a lot of time together, but they also have their own friends, their own hobbies, and they do their own thing. And that's not seen as like threatening in any way. That is just, they're both independent people who enjoy a relationship where they get to spend time together and time apart. So in a traditional couple, you will never see them go on vacation without each other. But in an independent couple, there might be trips that they take where one goes without the other, and that's not a big deal at all. That's part of their relationship. And then finally, you have separate couples, which view the relationship more as a matter of convenience, but don't rely on each other all that much. So they think staying together is easier. They like the finances of it. They like being able to split rent. They like having this sort of more almost a roommate relationship, but they don't spend that much time together. They won't travel together. They have their own social groups. And their relationship is more just because it's easy and they might enjoy being around, and that's all they super need. So all three of these can lead to these long-term relationships, marriages, whatever it might be. Also in this line of research is looking at sort of the relationship volatility at different ages. So we'll look at 3 different graphs that kind of analyze this, and they can be a little confusing to look at, so we'll walk through it really quickly. So on the x-axis, or the bottom axis of the graph, we have the age of the people in the relationship. So they were looking at younger couples, ages like 15 to 25. And then on the y-axis, we have what they were measuring on. And the 3 different lines refer to how long they've been in a relationship together. So the solid black line, they've only been together for 4 months. The gray hashed line in the middle refers to 9-month relationships, and the sort of dot dash line on top refers to 22-month relationships. So in this, we can see that younger couples that have been together for a shorter period of time, so 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds that have been together for 4 months, have lower ratings of support for their partners than those who have been together with their partners for much longer, so for 22 months, which, makes sense. And then as they grow up, as they get older, this gap sort of decreases. So young couples who have been together a long time are much more likely to perceive support than have been together a short time. Whereas once you're in that age of like 25, it sort of almost comes together at this mutual level of support, ranging right around that rating of 0.2. So you see this almost like volatility in this spread in younger people that you don't see in older people. And this spread is not only on support, it's also on how they rate their negative interactions. Younger couples who have been together a long time rate very highly the negative interactions that they have. Those who have been together a shorter time rate them more negatively. But not only are you seeing greater interactions of support, you're also seeing greater negative interactions in these younger couples that then sort of disappears as you get older and into longer relationships with the older couples. And we see a similar thing with jealousy, which younger couples who have been together for longer report higher levels of support, higher levels of negative interactions, and also higher levels of jealousy. And this connects back to that sort of cost-benefit analysis, the social exchange model, in adolescence, in that they are more self-oriented and operate more in this sort of cost-benefit, pro-con analysis in which they want to maximize their personal rewards and are less willing to compromise. And that diminishes over time. As we mature and we have more mutual respect, we seek more mutual gains. So as people age, they are better able to form better relationships, and even in short-term relationships. A 25-year-old will very quickly realize what is considered fair or healthy in a relationship and compared to a 15-year-old. And that's perhaps just because we gain skills or seek to form meaningful connections more quickly when we're older. But this sort of development from ages 15 to 25, you see this shift from a more cost-benefit, pro-con social exchange format to a more equity-based format in which we value mutual benefit in the relationship. Another thing we've seen in more recent research, again from that Pew survey from 2019, is that reasons for marriage and cohabitation also can differ. So the top rated reasons for people who want to be married is that they are in love and that they seek companionship. And while that is similar for cohabitation, those are both highly rated. If we look a little further down at the it made sense financially, it was convenient, wanted to test the relationship portions, we see that in cohabitation, people are more likely to value the sort of like convenience and finance level or the sort of testing the waters level of a relationship in cohabitation. So there's differing reasons between why somebody might want to just live with somebody else versus might want to be in a marriage with somebody else. And we also see that it's becoming more accepted to just be cohabitating with another adult. So there's research as to increases in cohabitation. So if we're looking at the left graph, we see that from 2002 to 2013 to 2017, more people are cohabitating versus valuing marriage and seeing the social benefits of it. If we're looking at the pie chart in the middle, that's saying whether or not it's acceptable for somebody to to be living with another person, even if they're unmarried, and that's now very widely acceptable. And we also have this sort of decision in society as to whether couples who want to stay together long term should get married, and pretty much everybody now is saying it's totally fine if they don't. If they want to get married, awesome, but if they don't, cohabitating is equally as valuable. So this sort of shift has been occurring in recent decades to value long-term relationships without necessarily seeing the requirement of marriage being present.
Okay, so thanks for sticking with me through a little bit longer of a lecture. But you are at the last slide of the whole course, so congrats on that, and for making it a good 8 weeks. Just to go through our to-do list, there are a couple of differences that I need to point out for this week because it is the last week of the semester. OSU did a fun thing where instead of having the 8-week semester end on a Friday, potentially would make sense, it instead ends on a Thursday, which does mess up our weekly deadlines a little bit, so I wanted to go through those very quickly. You'll still have your normal quiz and discussion post due Wednesday night, but there is no discussion responses needed, so don't feel like you have to respond to others. If you wish to, you can, but I'm not going to be taking grades for discussion responses, just the original post. And then you, instead of a reflection, will have your end of semester paper, which is 10% of your grade, that will be due Thursday. This is a little longer than the normal reflection paper, but instead of asking about the topics from this week specifically, I am asking you to reflect on your favorite topic from the semester. So hopefully it is a little bit easier to write because it's on something that interested you more. This can be a topic from the books, from the lecture, from a TED Talk that we watched, anything like that. And it just asks you to reflect a little more deeply on it. And if it was something that we already addressed in a past reflection, I ask that you dive a little deeper instead of just reusing the same content. But you are more than welcome to return to concepts that we've already done a little bit of writing or assignments on. But if you choose to bring up a new topic that was from a lecture that we never addressed in a discussion post or a reflection, that by all means, please do so. I'd love to hear your thoughts about stuff that we didn't address more directly through these assignments. All that being said, just keep an eye out for that Thursday deadline. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your summer. And please do consider filling out the student evaluation forms. Those are accessible on the left-hand side of your Carmen, or at least they should be. If not, you should have gotten an email about them not too long ago. It does help in the design of these courses, as well as my own teaching. So if you can fill those out, that is always greatly appreciated. But I hope everybody has a wonderful summer, and I really look forward to getting to know all of you through these online asynchronous posts that we've all been doing. So Thanks for taking this course, and I hope you have a wonderful day.